Welcome to LawPod. My name is Eva Richards. I'm an MLaw student at Queen's University Belfast. We're talking about QUB's Digital Investigations Lab, which is now in its third year. And I'm here with Kenzie, Brodie and Briana Mallon, who are both postgraduate students at Queen's as well. So maybe let's start with some introductions, a couple of sentences about yourself, what you're studying, and maybe what made you interested in joining the lab in the first place.
So I'm Kenzie. I'm in my LLM Human Rights and International Law at Queen's University. I had gotten really interested in the Digital Investigation Lab as I was already sort of researching Syria with the new transitional government that was coming in. And through that, I had learned that 181,000 people are still missing in Syria. And when I had heard about the Digital Investigation Lab, I thought it was a real chance to be able to research and help real people on the ground instead of just reading about it and researching. I thought it was better to be very hands-on.
So my name is Briana Mallon. I'm currently also undertaking international human rights law masters at Queen's. I got into the lab through a friend who had previously done her masters last year and had recommended it. So I sort of kept my eye out for the application, and from there just sort of went through the process. Really big on human rights, especially working directly with people and sort of helping in any way I can. Because I know especially when it comes to human rights and sort of the state of the world, you can get very bogged down and negative about it. But I think the lab is a really good way of actually doing something proactive with helping people.
So I joined the lab, this is my second year, and I remember the email coming through with quite a cryptic task to complete. And I'd spent a large portion of my teenage years playing, did you ever play GeoGuessr?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ah, okay. GeoGuessr. I spent quite a lot of my teenage years playing GeoGuessr, and I didn't think anything more of it than, oh, I remember doing something like this. This is quite fun. How did you guys approach? I remember this year the task was, it was a satellite picture, an overhead picture of some planes in a landing field or something. What did you think when you saw that, and then how did you approach it?
Yeah, so I'm sort of the same. I grew up with GeoGuessr as well. So I had seen the image and it was really, really cryptic from just looking at it on first glance. It was just an image of 4 fighter jets, I want to say, in a landing spot, and the task was to find when and where this image was taken. So maybe I just put it through Google reverse image search, and it had showed up with a Reddit post that had said it was somewhere in Turkey, but that's where the photo had been taken. And then from using Google's advanced search, you can go through a timeline. You're able to find when certain images are taken. So I was able to do that with the image and then find the image, and I had sent that off to Luke and Lydia, and a couple of weeks later they had told me I was part of the lab, which was pretty fun. I was really excited to get that email back.
How about you? Did you have the same kind of approach, or
Yeah,
did you?
Kind of random, but I knew about Google and reverse search imaging from just Pinterest or whatever. If I ever see something nice that I like and I want to find where it originates from, that's the first thing I do, is just literally put it through Google and see if I can find on ASOS or whatever. So I sort of just took a similar approach. I'm sure this image, it's obviously it's somewhere, and very similar. Result was Reddit, and then just sort of going based off that, the coordinates, or I think the nearby town, and just the historical imagery. So yeah, it was straightforward enough. I was kind of surprised because it was quite cryptic, I think, as you said, a really specific image of this overhead of planes in the middle of nowhere. So yeah.
And I think probably the first time we all met each other was at the training that was organised with Nick Waters from Bellingcat. Was there maybe anything particularly interesting you got out of that training or learned from it beyond how to buy drugs on the dark web?
Yeah, so I think it was a mix of Nick's experience with Bellingcat and his military experience already that made him really, really good with the training. He had went through how to find specific coordinates, how to find governate coordinates, how to find different types of satellite imagery. And he had also taught us which different servers or search engines to use, and be able to compile all of that into one document and use all of these different sources of open source research to come with one result. It was really interesting to see how many different ways you could go about one thing and still come to the same result. It was really good to maximize our research with him.
Yeah, I was kind of a fan for Bellingcat for a while because I knew my brother, for context, does cybersecurity, and he would have done the cold case sort of thing Bellingcat would sometimes run, where you look for people and it could have been decades ago that they've disappeared. So I would have been interested in Bellingcat anyway, so would have also jumped at the chance to meet Nick. I think for me, the biggest thing was how unsecure our information is online. Like it was even just looking for like using like just typing in PDF and putting a semicolon in and putting like confidential in and just seeing the amount of like documents that come up it was quite worrying. It made you double guess sort of what you put online and, you know, how traceable it is. And yeah, it did make you sort of very nervous walking out, but it was so interesting. There was, I think, as Kenzie said, like it's just how so many ways you can go about things and come to the sort of similar result. It was just the forensics were brilliant. It was.
I had that same kind of fear, I think, at the end, where you worry how much information is just out there and you're relying on people just not being interested enough to find out. One that really stuck with me, I think he was working on just looking at people's Strava things, and because, you know, a certain type of person uses Strava, and so especially then he was using it to locate kind of military bases in lots of different parts of the world. I think I saw one recently where they found a sort of warship. Do you see?
Yeah.
And it was, that's through someone's Strava
Some
data.
jogging, yeah.
It's so funny as well. Like we put so much of our lives on our phones and online. And then from that training with Bellingcat, it was just such a big eye opener to, if I posted a random photo of a beach, someone could go to that beach and find out where I was at that specific moment in time just from that one photo. It was crazy just to have that like recollection after.
I know that Taylor Swift, she'll always hide the background when she's making any kind of video because, you know, people can trace her to her hotel room.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I always think that like women in their 20s are so good at like researching anyone very deeply if your friend started to date someone.
Yeah, you're like the FBI friends.
Okay, so then throughout the year we've been working with Air Wars, so we've had the additional training with them and how they like to present the information. So what tools do you use, and what have you discovered that you've got your own kind of favourite tools you like to use?
Yeah, so I mainly use Google Maps and Copernicus browser, which was a browser suggested to us in one of the Air Wars meetings by two of their team members. They use it in their investigation, so I thought, well, it must be good enough for them. It should be good enough for us. It was a really good way to like step away from Google Maps because a lot of information wasn't really available on Google Maps, which was the biggest issue. You know, we were going from images on Google Maps from 10 years ago and strikes that had happened 5 years ago, and a lot of the geography wasn't lining up. So at least from Copernicus browser, we were able to see a lot of near images of the sort of landscape and be able to go in and zoom in and actually find the buildings we were looking for. One of the things I had noticed on Google Maps was a lot of the mosques, they're still reported as being standing on Google Maps, but then on Copernicus browsers, unfortunately, a lot of the mosques have been destroyed in the strikes, which had made a lot of geolocating very difficult at
they're
times.
often a landmark.
Yeah.
Mine is probably my most recent one favourite would be Wikimapia. It's surprisingly like accurate even in terms of how, so the main point of Wikimapia really sort of locates or notes any significant like areas, even shops like the butchers or the pharmacy. And it's been really helpful for me for some really difficult cases where there has been quite limited imagery, background imagery. The Google, like the satellite imagery has been quite blurred or there's not been a lot of it. So it's just made the job easier, really. I would do that, and then Facebook as well, because I'd remember from what Chris had told us, you obviously can pick up a lot from social media, as we just sort of said. And Syrians do prefer Facebook over like Twitter or Instagram. And usually whenever I struggle, there's no background imagery, even just putting in the date and the town name, you're actually able to pick up quite a bit. Even if it isn't from the same sort of incident, it's still the same town. And just even going through, sometimes it is a bit of a deep dive, like you're there probably for most of the day just looking through some random person's Facebook. But once you hit it, it's like striking gold. It's brilliant. It's really helpful when you do. You just have to have a bit of patience, unfortunately. But yeah, probably Facebook and Wikimapia, along with Google satellite imagery, are probably the best. You do need definitely more than one, because if you just rely on Google satellite, like you're going to be there all day. Like it's probably impossible to find it.
Yeah, there's just not enough on Google Maps to be able to do it thoroughly, and then being able to branch off with social media as well. I had realised like a lot of videos were on Twitter links.
Yeah.
So I would be going through a bunch of different people's Twitters for a while just to find a video that showed the landscape a little bit better and from their point of view to map out a sort of road on where I needed to be looking.
Do you want to talk through maybe a case that you've been looking at that was particularly either satisfying or difficult?
So me and my partner, we had recently looked at a case in Marat al-Numan, which had included 3 different strike locations in the one area. So we were looking at locations that were very far away from each other, but all within the same city. So it was quite difficult at times. 2 of the locations were in residential areas, which made it slightly easier. And then one of them was in a very grassy countryside just by the road. And through Twitter and through just going in and going through Syria with a fine-tooth comb, trying to find houses that looked similar to these houses or buildings that look similar to other buildings, and going through the Air Wars file on its own, we were able to find a video that had showed each strike location in different segments. So there was a press reporter going around videoing each location, and from that we were able to find that there was a school that we hadn't previously seen on Google Maps in the background. So we had found that kindergarten, and we had used that to track a map of where the reporter had walked to find 2 of the strike locations. And then for the final one, we had ended up making a panoramic image of the countryside. And unfortunately, that still wasn't enough to go on. So we were able to verify 2 of the locations, but not the other one, which is still amazing work. Me and my partner, we had spent about 3 weeks on this site. So it was really nice to be able to have an outcome rather than no outcome at all, and being able to at least provide the government surveillance for the 3rd location rather than nothing at all. So we were still able to provide something, which is great.
Yeah, I guess off the top of my head, I would be also working with my partner, Georgia, and it was sort of one of the first ones we had done, and it was in rural Syria. I want to say it was near Idlib, but Idlib would be sort of a starting point for most, I think, of our incidents anyways, but it was very rural, sort of very mountainous countryside, and again, sort of background imagery probably actually was the most helpful, and this is when I really start getting to use Facebook, as in just how I put in the dates. You'll have your standard journalists, and they're usually verified. They do such brilliant work in Syria, and they're usually local civilians anyways, and they sort of uptake this job during the war. So this incident in Pacific, it was literally having to go through each almost house and seeing before and after the date if it had been bombarded. There was this strip on the outside of the city or the town that sort of matched the imagery we'd seen. So sort of just to verify that, we again sort of did the before and after. And then also, as Kenzie said, I really like using the panoramic. So it's literally taking stills from the YouTube video or Twitter video and almost aligning it to create sort of this long image. And you'd be surprised how much you can get out of that. And it had again looked quite similar. And what I did to verify that, I was able to find this journalist on Facebook who actually was there the day. And unfortunately, what we had to do to double check it was actually a blanket that was used to cover one of the bodies, and was the same in one of the images Air Wars provided us and what was on this journalist's Facebook page. But from that, we were able to say for sure this is where the strike was and where we actually believe the victims were then buried, which was quite close because it was their home. It was obviously quite sad because in this instance, it was a lot of children were murdered. However, it's kind of, in some sense, there's a bit of relief with it because you do feel like you're maybe helping them. It's even just recognising that this did happen to them and verifying that these were innocent civilians and they were struck. So yeah, there was some sort of, I don't want to say satisfaction, but help or relief in some way doing it. Yeah.
Probably brings me to some of the downsides or the dangers of this kind of work, which is there is a lot of quite traumatic and quite graphic content that's associated with this. So I guess I'm curious, not just how you dealt with that, but maybe how you think it's kind of affected you.
So there's a lot of graphic material that we are seeing on a week by week basis. And I remember specifically we had one site that we were working on, which we weren't able to complete at all because a lot of the images that Air Wars had provided were just of infants. And it was a lot to come home with after that. And thankfully, Lydia and Luke and everyone else who was involved in the making of the lab had put on vicarious trauma training at the very beginning, which I think just having those helplines available and support points available has been such a benefit to everyone. Because I know it's not just me and Harshita who are dealing with seeing these images, it's everyone in the lab who has seen 1 or 2 of these images, which makes it quite hard. But I also think it's been really important in helping to realise that war affects civilians as well. Whenever we are hearing about wars, we're often thinking, oh, it's country versus country or it's soldier versus soldier. But then seeing these images, we're able to see how it impacts civilians in their day-to-day lives and how important it is to remember that even in conflicts, we still have these people who this is their life, and it's brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers and they need people to help them too. So at least with Air Wars and all the white helmets and the Red Crescent, they're able to get the help that they need, which I think is very important.
Yeah, I think whenever going into it, there was a bit of reluctance because whilst you do want to help, it is, it's sort of that primary impact it has on yourself. But I think even just the buddy system that we have, so working with our partners, we're not just dealing it with by ourselves. Like there's people who get it. And even just the lab in general, I think like when we have our sessions, we're all just chatting away to each other, like we all get on quite well. So even if like your buddy isn't in for the day, usually you're chatting away to someone else about it. And we're able to like sort of warn each other, if there's certain imagery that maybe it's best to avoid, not just for ourselves as well, but to preserve the dignity of the victims too, because they aren't just those pictures. They were, as Kenzie said, they were mothers, brothers, sisters, fathers, they were people. So yeah, it can be quite hard. I think I've been kind of, I don't want to say lucky, but like I've previously worked in family law, and from that you have to also build up quite a bit of resilience. So I've been able to rely on that, but sort of the information that Lydia have provided us in the training have been really great. And again, I think when you remember that you're working towards helping actual people, it helps a lot with that sort of, I guess, vicarious trauma. And again, it makes me feel quite satisfied because, again, you can get quite caught up in this, that this is just really awful. But again, this is you're helping these people. You're sort of almost vindicating their trauma because unfortunately, their victim status has been questioned. So we're almost able to sort of advocate for these people and fight back against sort of misinformation and disinformation and verify things.
Yeah, that's something that I remember from the training with Nick, actually, that, there are, even at the start of the invasion in Gaza, there was a lot of images and things that were flooding onto the internet, and they were actually mislabeled. They were things from Syria that just had the wrong label on them. And in a funny way, that invalidates not just the suffering of people in Gaza, but the suffering of people in Syria. And I think that's something that's quite important. Proving that something happened in a particular place at a particular time, it does really matter to the victims, to the people who are there. So I guess it brings me to participating in the lab throughout the year. I guess I'm curious what it's taught you about law and what it's taught you about the world and the place of, legal research in it.
So whenever I had come into the lab, I had already a really firm stance on where I want to pursue, where I want the lab to lead. I've researched Syria in a lot of my own work, and a lot of what's going on with Syria is really important to me. The transitional government, the people who are still missing, the constant arbitrary detention, a lot of that has been really interesting to me. And then from the lab, I've been able to see how everything has just really impacted civilians, and it's made my stance on human rights law a lot stronger. It's made me realise that there's an entire asymmetry between the global north and south, and that needs to be bridged. And there has to be some way to bridge it. It's trying to figure out a way to do that because it's so unfair, and it's just through more and more research, I think it will be able to happen. And I think as well, through the lab, I've been able to meet so many like-minded people, which has been great because often, whenever we're voicing a lot of these concerns, it's not really to the right crowd. If you're talking about politics, you want to talk to people who are politically inclined like you, and just being in a room of people who agree that what's going on is wrong and agree that it needs documented and we have to verify a lot of these war crimes. I think it's really important that we're all there together and we're all there to remind each other what we're doing there. It's really nice. I really like what we've been able to do, and throughout the year it's been able to really cement those beliefs of we're all human and war is really, really bad.
Yeah, I guess for me I've really in some way become quite sceptical. It's never taken things now at face value, especially with the advent and proliferation of AI. It's quite scary how, AI produced images actually just look so realistic. So it's, in some way, it has made me skeptical, but in a good way. I'm able to sort of verify things. I'm able to, put things through not even just Google, but reverse imagery, verify it through third-party platforms. And again, sort of as Kenzie said, it's sort of meeting people that I otherwise probably wouldn't have met, through, just because I'm doing masters, there's people doing law, even people in their undergrad doing this, and people from various backgrounds as well, but I've been able to get on really well with and sort of build on that for future reference. I guess it really comes back to helping people. It's not just sort of feeling helpless and sort of wondering what I can do. I know for a fact I can do this, and hopefully this eventually goes on to help people. Even if it is just being recognised that this happened to you, this was wrong, it shouldn't have happened, which I think is sort of, I think most people can agree on that, everyone deserves to be in a safe living environment and not have to be afraid that they'll wake up in the middle of the night to their roof being on top of them, you know. So yeah, I think it's taught me a lot of things. It's really helped with just not just being empathetic, but being proactive about causes. It's maybe a lot more curious about the world, but also about maybe conflicts or regions that would have been quite obscure to me. I've felt a bit more closer to them now, and a bit more knowledgeable. And it's also just, it's brought people together that I wouldn't have met before, which I'm really grateful for.
I think for me as well, it's really changed not just the way I research. You know, I think I do research differently now, but I think it has changed the way I think about how I explain what I'm doing to other people. You know, we've been doing these presentations throughout the year, and I think I've learned it's about the process. It's about proving how you know something, because it's not really clear always from looking at two sets of pictures how you got from one to the other. So I think personally in my like research and analytical skills, I learned a lot about just being methodical, being step by step, and making sure I'm bringing an audience with me along the way. And that's really fed into, in a funny way, all my other academic work, even though they're not about the same things at all.
Mm.
Yeah, no, I'm the same with that. Like on the academic side, I've realised like it's made me sort of fall in love with methodology a little bit, which is a really weird part of research to fall in love with. But being able to go through and verify your sources and verify them yourself as well. Because I know in law we have so many different articles and journals and websites and reports we're reading all of the time. But being able to go in and verify certain reports myself or verify certain case studies myself, it's really helped like the quantity of research that I'm able to like put out and the quality of it as well. It's just been so beneficial in like every aspect of uni, I feel.
Yeah, and I think it's really helped. You know, this is such an emerging new area, which is just technology and surveillance and all that stuff. And it's really it's a way of planting human rights in, and hopefully that it sort of begins to grow and blossom a wee bit. Because you always hear human rights are always very absent from conversations to do with technology and even war, ironically. You never hear about the primary impact on civilians. We are now hopefully starting something that, you know, will go on to be beneficial, whether it's, you know, using this stuff as evidence for future cases, hopefully creating a new precedent that people can rely on. I also just want to add as well that it's really helped remind me about the impact of the grassroots organisations and campaigns and how they're just so fundamental to these wars, these conflicts, like the white helmets. They're never not in any of the incidents I've done, like straight onto the scene. And they're probably the first people forgotten about this. You know, it really reminds you, it brings home that at the end of the day, we're all human. But it's humans and other civilians helping each other. So they're the first forgotten, but probably the most important.
What would you say to someone who was maybe thinking about joining the lab next year?
I would definitely say to join it. It's been one of the best parts of my postgrad, I would definitely say, has been the lab. I've been able to meet so many like-minded people like myself and develop my own research skills. And again, with everything that is currently going on in the Middle East and in Southwest Asia and South Asia, there's so much more that's going to be documented and so much more that we need to verify with the ongoing US and Iranian conflict and how basically every country is going to get involved at some point. I think it's really important that we're able to teach ourselves and other people how to be able to do open source investigations and to be able to verify what we're seeing online. Again, like I know like AI has been brought up like quite a bit, but I know myself, even whenever I was scrolling on Instagram, I was seeing a lot of AI imagery, especially what's surrounding Gaza, which is so misleading. It's just having a group of people have that skill of using open source investigation and being able to teach it to other people and then teach it to other people, you know, it creates a system where we're able to create real meaningful change. So I think definitely like if anyone does want to join the lab or if they've just heard about it now and they want to join, like definitely join the lab. Like it's great. It's been great fun.
Yeah, 100%. I would have been a bit of a technophobe, I think, before this, quite worried about all of it, or, you know, because that's all, the first thing I think of is like misinformation, disinformation, especially by like, you know, nefarious actors, but would 100% like would encourage people to do it. Just the skills you pick up alone, it's so transferable. Again, the people you meet like, as well, would not have the chance to meet again or anywhere else really. And just to even have a crack at it, you'd be surprised how quickly you learn things as well. And just the satisfaction that comes from helping people, it's so much more worth anything else I've done probably in my postgrad here. and just to really have a go at it. Like, you'd be surprised as well the amount of people who've just picked this up as a hobby and have managed to make careers out of it. It's crazy. But again, you're having a real world impact, and it's actually a really practical thing, I think, besides actually even being on the ground there. It's making sure that these are documented.
Amazing. So thank you so much to Kenzie and Briana for sharing your time, your thoughts, your experiences of the Digital Investigations Lab here at Queen's.